Hello, peoples, and welcome to your first animal behavior lecture online. We're going to be doing this every so often throughout the semester because it's going to free us up to have different kinds of discussions in class. So make sure you do these ahead of time. So we're going to start out with this one and actually just begin by talking about how we study behavior. What does it mean for us to do this? Or what is it about animal behavior that makes it both similar to and different from other kinds of biology classes you've taken, other kinds of biology research you've read? So we're really going to get into that. And one of the differences is, it comes down to how questions are asked. In Bio 300, in your other bio majors or environmental science major courses, we always start by asking questions. Questions really drive the way research takes place. But in animal behavior, we have to pay very close attention to how we ask questions. The ways that questions and their subsequent hypotheses are framed, are built, can profoundly impact the approaches and the methods that we use to examine behavior. They can also impact how we interpret our findings. So I'm going to give you an example of what this sort of looks like, and I'm going to talk through it. You're going to talk to yourself or say, hey, shut up, dumbhead, um, while you're watching this. But we're going to talk about an example of these. And the example that we're going to use are about prairie voles. Prairie voles are small rodents. There are a lot of species of vole in the world, but prairie voles are particularly interesting to a number of people because prairie voles tend to be monogamous. That means that males and females will remain together after they mate with each other, and neither the male nor the female will mate with anybody else. Prairie voles, however, are only one kind of vole, and most other vole species are non-monogamous. So that's a set of observations. Prairie voles are monogamous, other voles are not monogamous, that we can use to ask questions. And one of the questions is, why are there these differences? Why are prairie voles monogamous? It's a question people have asked and looked at in a lot of different ways. So if we look at prairie voles and start thinking about them, that's a little prairie vole in the corner. Hello, prairie vole. One hypothesis that has been tested is that prairie voles are actually wired to enjoy monogamy more than other species of voles. When we talk about wired to enjoy, it's shorthand for the ways in which the brain responds during sets of activities or behaviors. Wired to enjoy really means that the areas of the brain associated with pleasure or memory or emotion become sort of more active during these activities than other parts of the brain. So people have looked at this, and they actually have gone in and looked at areas in the brain and how they become active during and post copulation in prairie voles and compared it to other kinds of voles. And what they have found by looking at these prairie voles is that vasopressin is released during copulation. And prairie voles have way many more vasopressin receptors in the area of the brain associated with memory and emotion. So every time they copulate with an individual, the areas associated with emotion, how you feel, and memory about that individual are excited in the brain. That there's more activity in prairie voles than in other species. So there you go. There's a test that evaluated this hypothesis in prairie voles. But people have taken this in other directions. And one of the things that people have looked at is whether or not prairie voles are actually genetically different from other voles. And when they have looked at this, they found that other voles are lacking a section of the V1AR gene. This particular gene, or the particular area of the gene that's missing, is responsible for the construction of these vasopressin receptor proteins. So the proteins that are actually found in the brain that bind to vasopressin during copulation. So prairie voles have this section of the gene and other individuals don't. And people have actually said, all right, well, let's actually test this. What does this particular set of genes do? And so they've done implants. They've implanted them in particular parts of the brain, in either the central pallium or the ventral pallium. The ventral pallium is the area associated with memory formation and emotion. When they did this, they found that males who received gene implants, this V1AR gene implant in the ventral pallium, tend to spend much more time in contact with their partners than they do with strangers. Individuals who receive this implant in other parts of the brain, this is the central pallium, don't tend to differentiate, and individuals who receive implants of other kinds of genes in the ventral pallium or the central pallium don't tend to change these behaviors. So, what they concluded is that it is the presence of this gene that changes the way prairie voles respond with respect to their partners. All right, there you go. But other people have gone other directions with this. One hypothesis was that prairie voles that mate with more than one female have more offspring than males that don't mate guard. So males who mate guard actually end up being more successful overall because they have more copulations. And as a result, they get more copies of their genes out into the next generation. And so you'd expect to see more and more individual prairie voles spending time with their individual mate to prevent others from doing this. So people have looked at this, and they found that when there is no mate guarding, so when males do not spend time with their female, so they actually went and allowed a male and a female prairie vole to mate, they removed the male and watched the female behavior. And in the case where males were removed from the situation, female voles will go off and mate with more than one male. And so this graph actually shows you the amount of time spent with individuals based on their rank. Higher ranked males tended to have individuals spend more time with them. Individual females would spend more time with them. So in this case, mate guarding by the male of the female is what drives monogamy. Another hypothesis that has been tested is that prairie voles are monogamous because it's a trait that came from some ancestral vole species. They don't, and it didn't necessarily evolve in prairie voles, but it evolved in some ancestor to prairie voles, and it's just a relictual behavior or a relic that is left over from other individuals. And what they have found when looking at these phylogenies, so here's prairie vole, and this one is tends to be monogamous. The sagebrush vole here also tends to be monogamous, and and they share a common ancestor here. So the pine vole also monogamous. California sometimes monogamous, sometimes not. But this is the common ancestor to all of these voles, and they tend to be monogamous. So prairie voles maybe are monogamous not because of some other reason, but because their ancestors were monogamous. So what we've just done is to go through a series of different hypotheses that all aim to address the same question. Why are prairie voles monogamous? What we're going to talk about on Thursday is this. How do you explain all of these results? Which of these hypotheses that we just went through do you think is the best and why? And given this situation, and given that I set up this situation as something that we can use to understand and how we're going to approach all sorts of questions in behavior, what implications do you see for other studies that we're going to look at? So that's what we're going to talk about on Thursday. So yeah, be prepared and stuff. All right. See ya.